and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. I am so excited to be here today. I have the great honor of being here today with Dr. Tony Nader, who is a globally recognized expert in the science of consciousness and human development. He received his medical degree and trained in internal medicine and psychiatry and completed his PhD in neuroscience at Harvard University and MIT. He is the head of the Transcendental Meditation organization globally and the successor to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. His interests to explore the full potential of the human physiology and the human mind have led him also to study and conduct research on ancient and modern techniques of self-development. His research has been published in numerous scientific journals. He is a best-selling author and has discussed his expertise at academic institutions, including Harvard and Stanford University. And his latest book, Consciousness is All There Is, has recently been released on August 6th. So I am so excited for this conversation. Thank you for joining me, Dr. Nader.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Julie.
Wonderful. And this is a personal conversation for me too. You know, I have been doing the podcast for quite some time, but I think this is our first conversation really diving into consciousness and meditation. Although it has personally been a journey of mine for many years. And over my own personal growth journey, I've explored different types of meditation, but really was very lucky to be exposed to transcendental meditation and be trained. We have a beautiful center here in Lexington, Kentucky, about 2 years ago, I think, a little more than 2 years ago. And so that has been my primary mode of meditation for the last 2 years. So it's really an honor to be able to meet you and to talk about this today.
My pleasure and honor. It's great to talk to you.
And you have such an interesting background, you know, truly blending this science and spirituality and, you know, coming into this as a medical doctor, as a research scientist, I think is so fascinating. But I would love to hear a little bit of your background. First, what drew you to study medicine, to study psychiatry, neuroscience, and then how did you learn about transcendental meditation, or how did that start to become part of your life as well?
My journey, like everyone, is a combination of factors. Medicine in my family is a tradition, and so I almost had no choice but to go to medicine. But I really embraced it because I wanted to understand human behavior and human thinking and how we can make life better for everyone. And I thought medicine, which will help through the physiology, balancing it and balancing the nervous system, make us do the right things if we are balanced and healthy and happy in the physiological level. And so I thought what to do better than study medicine, study human physiology. And so I went through that. At the same time, I had been interested in the mind. And because mind and body relationship was also an enigma at that time. What is mind? What is body? Do we have two things, or is it one creating the other? Most likely, is it the body creating the mind, and the mind is the result of the nervous system? But we have something that is mental that has no way to kind of explain it from a mechanical physics and biology and physiology. So I researched in my studies during medical school and before the different techniques that help us fathom the mind. And at that time, I learned transcendental meditation, which gave me the chance to dive deep within and experience finer levels of the mind and what I would call enlarge and enliven and expand my consciousness, my awareness. And so I felt that there was a powerful effect also from consciousness on the physiology, on the ability to be healthy and happy and do things right, which after all I felt were the most important thing, because we live our lives through our awareness. If we are happy, that's what counts. In fact, what does it matter almost to have a good body without consciousness? We wouldn't know we have a good body. What does it
Right.
matter to be wealthy and be in love or have love and lots of knowledge if we are not conscious? So consciousness is the screen on which the whole movie of life is happening. And therefore, I started to get interested in consciousness. And initially, I thought if I studied after finishing medicine psychiatry, I thought that will help me to understand the mind from a physical perspective. But as you know, as a doctor yourself, psychiatry deals with diseases of some extreme case, and you use medical drugs and medicines to solve schizophrenia or depressive disorders, anxiety, and use this through medical ways. So I thought this is not going to give me the full answer. I was still pursuing understanding things from a physiological, chemical perspective, even though I really understood that the consciousness has something very important. But I was still thinking that consciousness maybe is a product of the nervous system. And so I thought maybe I go into research, and instead of psychiatry, I study neurology, and I do research on the brain. So I was happy, lucky to be accepted at MIT and Harvard and to do research on the brain. My PhD is in brain and cognitive science, which really associates how the brain works so that we have ability to hear, to sense. How do we have our ability to recognize things or have feelings based on the brain and all of that. At that time, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who is the founder of Transcendental Meditation, which is a technique that comes from thousands of years back, it's really a supreme technique of yoga, the mental yoga. He invited me to India to speak with him and think about research on this. And so I went there for just a few months, supposedly. I was in Boston, I had a car, I'm a pilot, so I had a plane.
Oh, wow.
I had a house on Beacon Hill next to the Mass General Hospital. And so they were all behind waiting. I had patients and all of that. So I went for a couple of weeks. And they became a couple of months, and I had to call back and tell my friend doctor to take care of my patients. I called my uncle who lived in Connecticut to sell my car and sell my plane. And then
Wow.
when a year went by, sell the house. And so what was 2-3 weeks became a lifetime of research because I was fascinated. And I thought it's a chance. Every time I would think, okay, it's a sabbatical, maybe I take a year to study the mind, to study this knowledge and how it helps us. And then it became a lifetime of research and study. And coming to the answers of the big questions that I was asking myself since I was young, like every one of us, some of us let go of it and get onto a career. But some crazy people like me, they leave their profession and
Keep
but I don't
searching for
think I
those
was
answers.
crazy because I would do it in a eye blink, in a moment to repeat the same thing because it gave me really deep answers. And all of this research and study led me to some profound conclusions. And that's why I share it in this book that you mentioned, this consciousness is all there is, explaining what is the ultimate reality, what's the purpose of life, and the big questions about meaning, about freedom and mind-body relation, like that.
Pretty incredible. And what an incredible story. I can imagine that going off for a few weeks and then there you are years later. Well, I do want to circle back in a moment to understand how TM fits into this, but I'd love to open up to that bigger question of, what exactly is consciousness and why should we care about it? Why should we be talking about it? And from a very beginner perspective, from people who maybe haven't started to think about this question much before.
So consciousness is that subjective personal experience that we have that allows us to experience all that we experience, basically. So if you see a flower is seen through the eyes, but consciousness is where the picture of the flower actually ends up becoming a personal experience. Which means if you don't have consciousness, you don't have any experience. Not only what you see, but what you hear or smell and all that, but also what you feel. Love, I would say, is consciousness with a certain filter or with a certain color. And so there are different levels of consciousness, different layers of consciousness, different flavors of consciousness. For example, when you are dreaming, you are aware of something, and you think it's very real. And it's because there is something happening in your consciousness that makes you believe that, you're flying or you're falling or you have a wonderful experience with somebody, or you have a tiger maybe jumping at you, depending on the background where you are. And you think they are real, and they cause heart palpitation and fear and blood pressure and all of that. So that's also a kind of a state of consciousness. So consciousness has different states, has different qualities, have different flavors. In sleep, for example, you're not aware of anything. So awareness is not there, but consciousness as a whole, I say that it is also there, because the body is ready to wake up if you make a strong noise, for example. And if you are somebody pinches you or does something, you wake up. That means your body has some level of consciousness, but it's different than the dream. It's different than the waking state. And even in the waking state, we think always, we are conscious, we are the same conscious person. But actually, when we look at it carefully, we can have different levels of consciousness. We can be drowsy, we can be sleepy, we can be depressed, we can be afraid, and then we have narrow vision. We can be feeling good and happy and expanding, having rested well. So our consciousness is broader. We can see things in a much bigger, much better picture. We're not upset with a small thing because our consciousness is expanding. So these are the consciousness levels that we experience as humans. But consciousness as a whole, and that is where we come to the big philosophical question. Is it the product of a nervous system? Is it just because we humans have a nervous system that kind of somehow creates consciousness? And is it only our own, quality, our own advantage as humans, or is it also in animals? To what extent it's in animals? And since we see in humans gradations of consciousness, maybe the animals also have gradations of consciousness. Some animals have higher consciousness and others have lower consciousness. And so this led me to think that consciousness is on a spectrum, on a range. It is not just human-like consciousness. And that is very important in understanding basically what consciousness is truly, and realizing that consciousness is on a range of things. Because if we want to think consciousness is just like humans, then we lose the point and we lose the true reality. Consciousness expands to animals, to trees, to plants, and to even inanimate objects. But it is not, again, I'm repeating maybe many times, it is not human-like in the cat. It might have some qualities of human-like, but it's not fully human-like. Maybe the cat doesn't recognize itself when it looks in the mirror, and we know it doesn't. Maybe some other animals have a self-awareness. So as you go down into the spectrum, you have less and less consciousness. And then I define consciousness then as any sensing, any detecting, any reacting to anything is one aspect of consciousness, in fact. And so that takes us to the question, the big question, where this consciousness comes from. Okay, so my theory, what I like to present, and my conviction based on research, based on study, based on comparative analysis, and based on empirical findings, which means actual research with control groups, and based on its explanatory power, you know, I project and I suggest and I hypothesize that consciousness is primary. Consciousness is like a field, and that field is beyond space and time. It is infinite, it is not limited, and it exists by itself. It is not something physical, it's something that is non material, non physical, and it exists by itself. And you can say it's like an ocean that has no boundaries. Of course, it's not an ocean made out of water because it's not material or physical. It's just a field like an electromagnetic field or something that just is. And then all these specific consciousnesses, my consciousness, the consciousness of the cat, the tree, the dog, whatever, are different ways of experiencing that ocean of consciousness. So the ocean of consciousness has waves. If you jump up on the wave and sit on the wave, and your vision is so tiny that you can only see the wave, you think that's all there is. But if you transcend, that's how we come back to transcendental meditation. If you go beyond the wave, the surface wave, and dive deep, you will find there is an ocean that actually creates the waves. So the different individual consciousnesses and qualities of consciousness are depending on individual ability to experience different aspects of consciousness. That's how we have the absolute consciousness and we have the specific consciousnesses that are on a range from almost nothing, like the consciousness of an elementary particle is absolutely almost nothing consciousness, but it still reacts to another particle. And we are saying, well, that's how you can be minimally reactive or minimally sensitive. But of course, the particle doesn't know it's a particle, have no idea what a particle is, doesn't know it exists, it has no sense of self-referral. It's just a meager, minor level of consciousness. And then you build it up. You build it up, greater consciousness through the animal kingdom. And then humans have a more ability to be conscious of more things.
Wow, it is a beautiful illustration and such a different way to think about our life and our existence. And so I'd love to just illustrate or compare. You mentioned TM is a way for people to understand and tap into this idea that it is not just the surface level of consciousness that we are experiencing day to day, but there is actually this greater field of consciousness that we are all connected. And it's a different way to live. It's a different way to see life. And so could you illustrate that for us? What would be the difference in terms of the way of living for someone who's just up here on the surface all the time versus someone who understands this definition of consciousness and is able to then tap into that larger field?
It really depends on your vision, your ability to see, not through the eyes, but through the experience. And that is what we call either narrow consciousness or broad consciousness with broad awareness. To take the metaphor again and illustrate it, because that usually helps imagining things better. So, of course, metaphors have their limitations, but still they help a lot in figuring out something. If you are sitting on a wave in a little boat or little, you are small, suppose, and the wave is huge.
A little raft, yeah.
You are big. But if we imagine ourselves as small and that our vision is not seeing far, it's just short-sighted, and we can see only very little and nearby, what we see is the wave, only a wave. And we are isolating ourselves as only this wave, and that's life, is all that there is this just this wave, this small wave in which I am. And suddenly another wave splashes onto you or sends some water onto you. You get scared that you're going to lose your own wave, you're going to fall, everything is just limited, and you hold on to yourself and you want to fight the other, and you want to to protect yourself and all of that, which is all very fine. But because your vision is limited, you don't see the wholeness of the reality. Now you expand your vision a little bit and you start seeing more waves, and you kind of say, well, I am one of those waves, and that is all fine and all okay, but still, we have danger to disappear or something happen to us and all of that. And now you say, well, if your vision expands even more and you start diving in the ocean, you take the vertical direction and you start discovering that, oh, there is a calm, quiet ocean underneath those waves. And it's the ocean that actually creates all the waves. Then you go to the depths of who you truly are within ourselves. So now we pass from the metaphor to the experience. So you transcend means you go beyond the surface wave and go to a deeper level within yourself, and you actually discover that original ocean of consciousness that we were talking about. And you know that you are that. Of course, you are the wave, but when you open your awareness to your true inner self, you know you are the ocean. Now, what happens with doing that is not just, oh, I'm happy, I am the ocean, that's very nice. What happens is a lot of things, because when you are the ocean, you truly are the ocean, and you can tap into that energy and intelligence and creativity, which means, in the analogy, all the power of the ocean. The power of the ocean to create big waves or small waves, to settle down, to influence any wave at any distance. And remember, our ocean is infinite, is unbounded. It's not like our, Atlantic or Pacific Ocean or whatever. They are already huge, but this ocean of consciousness is unlimited, is unbounded, is a field of all creativity, all possibilities, because it is from that ocean that all that we see, that all that we experience, that all that we live, that the whole universe and maybe multiverses come from that ocean. So it's not just some little ripples of waves and big waves and small waves. Our ocean, which is our true self, is unbounded and unlimited and infinite. So what happens during that process? What happens first is when you rest deeply in your mind, because you're settling down, your mind rests and the body rests very deeply. And we have shown this scientifically. The scientists have shown that the body also settles down and gains very deep rest, even while maintaining awareness. So it's a state called restful alertness, restful wakefulness. So you're very rested, very alert at the same time. And what this does is clears up the stresses and the strains and the fatigue from the mind and from the body. In the same way as deep sleep, for example, removes the fatigue of the day, this deep dive within ourselves and the settling down is so deep and has such a quality, because it's alertness at the same time as rest, that it eliminates the fatigue and the tiredness and the stresses that even have been, there in our life for many, many years, maybe that we even forgot them. And that's what we call, memories that are no more memories. They are just there, and they are influencing our life today. They're not allowing us to to live the full value of our existence, because they block our ability to experience the self. And so the benefits come naturally from diving deep within, on the physiological level, on the mental level, and also on the social level, and on the spiritual level also. Although spiritual in this case doesn't mean religious or based on belief, because whether you are from one religion or the other, it doesn't matter. When you transcend, you're just going into yourself, and you can believe in God or adore the God or not believe or whatever you like in your own way. That's no problem. What is sure is that your vision is more clear, you gain more clarity, and you gain more intelligence and power from within because you are diving deep within. And as you grow in this practice, I know I'm going long, maybe you want to.
No, it's all fascinating.
As you go along with that, with a long time, you actually start seeing that all the ripples and all the waves are only yourself. And that gives a great feeling of peace and harmony because everything is now yourself from an experiential level, not only from an intellectual level. And that has very profound, fulfilling, peaceful, and harmonious effects on one's life, one's behavior, one's relation to others.
Wow, so many questions that are popping up as you're speaking about this. I think one that you mentioned is this: it is very experiential and it's hard to understand until you've experienced it. Even if there is so much science and technical knowledge out there, it is something to experience on a personal level. And I think for people listening, a lot of my listeners do CrossFit, and they can maybe relate to that in that you could read about CrossFit, you could see it, but until you actually do it, you don't really understand what it is. And the benefits, like you said, there's a different way of living, which I want to get to in a second, but also in terms of healing and cleaning up past stresses that you may not even realize are with you on a day-to-day basis. We all have, I think, this kind of constant fight or flight or this go, go, go of our world today where we're always moving. And this allows this moment of rest and to release some of those stresses, but also some of the things that maybe happened long ago that we're not even aware of. And I was wondering if you could share, I had read that for you, TM was helpful in overcoming some of the stresses. I think you grew up in Lebanon, there was a civil war, and how that was helpful for you personally, or how you see it being helpful for other people in a similar way.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a determining also factor. As I was in medical school, beginning medical school, there was a civil war that started. And in the emergency room, I had to face very, very hard situations, very hard. People I don't want to even describe, but you might want to imagine. And also there is fear of being oneself harmed. I had friends who died. I had parents who were hurt physically by shrapnels or bullets and like that. And so and it all was just on the basis of certain beliefs and certain groupings of people that believe in certain religion, the other in another, certain believe in a certain political or economic system than the other. And all of this got so mixed up that it led to this craziness. And that really led me to ask, what is it all about and how we can understand life and how we can make it better for everyone on an intellectual level, on an experiential level, but also directly on the ability to withstand the stress and to be maintaining my inner resilience and balance and ability to face this situation. So I really realized that it's by being strong within ourselves that we can give strength to others, by being happy that we can give happiness to others. So it's very important to take care of oneself, take care of one's mind and body, even if we are just thinking altruistically. A doctor wants to help the patient and thinks of, staying up late or coming up on emergencies when they would rather go to sleep normally, but they wake up and they take their responsibilities, as doctors know. And for that, it requires that we are well within taking care of ourselves. So transcendental meditation helped me a lot in this situation. And people live this in different ways during conflicts, or sometimes when there is an election or there is something, and people get divided and they get attached to something or the other, as if the whole world is going to go fall apart if the other person wins. And you want this thing and you get anxiety. And it seems there is now a new syndrome called election stress syndrome.
Yes.
Like PTSD, post-traumatic stress, but they're analyzing it. And it seems in 2016 in the US was like influencing 40% of the people. And 2020, it was as many as, I think, 50, 60%. And they expect that in this one, it's almost 80% of the people are going to have some kind of election stress syndrome. I don't know the exact numbers, but these are approximate, and they are within these ranges. And so it's very important to cultivate resilience, cultivate strengths within, and be able to withstand situations and face circumstances, no matter what party or whatever happens. We need clarity, we need inner peace from ourselves, and then we choose whoever we want to choose. But protect yourself first, so that you actually choose in the best way that suits you, not on the basis of noise and all kinds of factors. And so we're going to have a program which is called Meditate America on September 12th. And we'll have a number of dignitaries and important people and celebrities coming in New York to actually inspire people during that time to go back to themselves and heal themselves and be resilient, and then expect the best even in the outer results, so that there is, at least we don't lose our balance due to whatever outside events are happening.
Wow, that is incredible. And yes, what a different experience we might all have if we were all practicing transcendental meditation during such a stressful time like this election. Wow. What on the topic of syndromes or physical symptoms, disease states, what do we know about the impact of practicing TM on our physical health?
Well, the research on TM is very extensive. There are about 600 very well documented and controlled scientific studies. Most of them are published in peer-reviewed journals that show the effects on blood pressure, for example, on heart disease and on stroke, etc., and prevention of these. And many, many studies on different aspects of stress, cortisol level, skin resistance, heart rate, breathing rate. All of these indicate less stress. And even the blood flow goes from the parts of the brain that deal with stress and are stressed, which are in the limbic system and the amygdala. We see that when you practice transcendental meditation, the blood flow moves to the frontal cortex and the upper part of the brain, which is the executive part, which shows that you have broader comprehension. And there is electroencephalographic changes that show coherence between front and back, right and left. So, there's effects on asthma, on different studies that have been done on many, many factors that show that there is personal improvement. But what is fascinating and also supports my, theory that consciousness is primary is that when a group of people practice transcendental meditation together, or even independently, depends on the number, they create a field effect which is beyond their physical presence, and that influences crime in society and all negative factors in society. There are 116, it's a lot of research studies that have shown this effect, which we call Maharishi effect, in recognition of the founder, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who has predicted that effect. And these studies show, for example, there is one longitudinal study which took many, many years, like 20 years of follow-up almost, and that shows the number of people practicing transcendental meditation together in the United States versus other factors. And it has shown very direct correlation. So when the numbers have reached a certain critical number, then we have seen decrease in crime, decrease in accidents of the road, decrease in hospital admission, decrease even in infant mortality, decrease in deaths from drugs, and all of that. So all of these factors, which seem to be not connected to each other or not correlating with each other, are all correlated to the number of people who practice this program together. And that shows the positive effect of taking the collective consciousness in a way to the depths of the ocean, to the settling value, rather than being tossed around by the waves on the surface.
That's incredible research. I had read about one of those studies, I think, in the Washington, D.C. area that was just so illuminating. And I think, it's a different way to think about solving problems, right? We could create all of these different policies or different interventions here on this physical plane to improve some of these numbers. But maybe we could also, change the collective consciousness by practicing and having more people practice this type of meditation. And I've experienced, I can relate to what you shared earlier about the increased resilience in practicing this personally. I know for me, that is the primary thing that I experienced going through a very difficult and stressful emotional time. I realized as long as I was doing my meditation, I could handle what was coming my way. But if I missed it for a day or two, all of a sudden I started feeling very unstable and wasn't able to do the things that I needed to do in my day-to-day life. So that's a very real thing. And thinking about this then on a personal level, so on the collective level, okay, maybe if we are all meditating and changing, tapping into this deeper consciousness, we can change things like crime rates or mortality or other things that are happening in our society. But how can we also use that when we think about our day-to-day lives, tapping into this, deeper ocean of consciousness in order to make changes in our day-to-day lives, as opposed to trying to, force things to happen on a physical level?
Think of the day when you have slept well in the night and you have eaten properly and you wake up fresh, and think of that day, how it unfolds. You are able to solve problems, things happen to you even in a nicer way. If something big problem even happens, you are able to manage it. And think of the day when you have not slept well, when you are tired, when you are stressed. And then you go to a day and even the smallest things irritates you, things seem not to work, and all of these things. Now imagine that you can dive so deep into yourself that you get this refreshing clarity and good feeling. And imagine you take this to quite an extent, to an extreme almost extent, where you are infinitely rested, infinitely settled within yourself. So what this does to do day to day is it gives you greater clarity. You're able to see things. Even your intuition improves because you start doing the right things, and automatically you make the right choices. You're able to overcome if difficulties or obstacles happen. And what we have experienced, which is very unexpected almost, but unusual, but it really supports or is part of this paradigm that I present in the book. What we have seen is that doors actually open more and more for you because you are connected through that field of consciousness. Then you get what people call good luck, things happening like, oh, today I feel lucky, things are happening in a nice way to me. It doesn't mean winning the lottery, but it means, it means good luck in terms of you want something and it happens. People respond to you in a better way, in an unexpected way. Suddenly this is a day where everything is working. And people have had these days of clarity. Now, what we're saying is this becomes our habit of experiencing life because we are in the ocean of consciousness. We connect with others more. Others are supporting us more. They don't know why or how, but we are on the basis of life. And this is really how we have to understand, as we come back to your just comment just before this question. This is how we can solve our problems, as you said, from a better perspective. Because if we are looking at life as being always only material and physical, then in our back of our understanding, back of our mind, back of how we should solve things, it's based on material and physical things. But if we understand that life is more than that, there is more depth in it, there is consciousness, there is that inner spirituality that is there. Spirituality, again, means, love is spiritual because it's not material. All that it means is that which is not physical and material. Although the physical material is also part of consciousness, but this is, you read the book and see how this works out. But when we have a vision of reality that is complete, that shows us the meaning of life, which is on the basis of expanding consciousness, expanding of our awareness, growing in unity with everything, going deeper and knowing we are the ocean and everything else and everyone else is the ocean, then we kind of relax. Yes, there is not the other wave that's going to crush me and destroy me. I am the ocean and I am the other wave, and they can be full and they can survive and be happy. I am in the ocean. What does it, it doesn't touch me in a sense, because I am that which upholds all of this.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live and experience life. And I think, like you said, this is independent of any religion or any other specific way of, or yes, any religion or faith, but something that can be tapped into. You think about concepts like prayer or manifestation are really based on this idea of tapping into that deeper level of consciousness to then, bring things into reality. And there's now so much science behind this. I think that a lot of people hear concepts like that and they think, oh, that's woo-woo, it's not scientific, and they don't want to hear about it. But I think we're seeing this movement of more and more people, because there's more science to understand it, being open to these concepts, which is why I appreciate so much the perspective that you bring in your teachings and your writings. And, seeing people even like, someone like Andrew Huberman, who is known as a scientist and a biohacker. I saw a video clip of him talking about using prayer, and for things that happen in his life, using prayer that he couldn't biohack his way into. And so, I think it's just a very exciting time where more and more people are open to learning about this and understanding it and using it. And then on a collective level, hopefully we can tap into that and really create some positive change in our world.
Beautifully said. Absolutely. That's the whole idea of my book, just what you said.
Wow. Well,
and to explain how it works and why it works like that, on the basis of evidence and research and physics and experience and logic and analogies and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we get ready to wrap up and close, I would love for you to just describe for us a little bit of the mission, the larger purpose, the larger mission. You've referenced it a few times talking, but why you do this work, and also of TM and the mission that was set out by Maharishi. And how do you hope that this work will continue to be actualized in the world?
The mission, if you like, is to bring to light that which is real and dispel the darkness which hides and allows us to see things that are not real as if they are real. So it's really bringing the light of knowledge to dispel the darkness of ignorance. And ignorance really means to assume that everything is physical and material. That is the ultimate ignorance, really. We ignore ourselves, we ignore who we are. We think we are that individual small thing that is, thrown in this world, and it has to struggle and strive and suffer and all of that. And that is because we don't know who we truly are. By transcending and knowing mentally, experientially, intellectually also will help, because it will help to explain the experience. Then we know who we are. And as we know who we are, we grow in greater fulfillment and happiness within, because we are in touch with reality. If you live in a non-real world and that's not real, you are, it's like people in a dark room. They fall and they kick each other and they fall on each other and they are angry with each other. But what can they do? The one is walking and doesn't see the other, though they hit the other by mistake. It's not even intentionally. But then it becomes intentional, because they're afraid. They start pushing, they start pulling. And if you bring the light and show the path, then fine, everybody finds their way and find their path. So the mission is to bring the light of knowledge, the light of consciousness, dispel the darkness and ignorance, and the rest will be automatic. People will have to live their own culture, their own beliefs, their own language, their own style of living, whatever. This is the richness of life on the surface. But if we know all that we are the field that nourishes all those outer experiences and establish our consciousness on that level, then we can have peace and harmony and happiness. So the ultimate mission is happiness and fulfillment for every individual, peace and harmony and invincibility to every nation and to every people, all good to everyone and none good to no one.
That is beautiful. And for anyone who, it sounds like, oh, this is such a pie in the sky mission. I truly believe it's possible, right? And you have
yes. Read the book and you will see that the logic why it's not pie in the sky.
Right. There's a reason why it works. And I would encourage anyone listening, if you have not yet tried TM, to give it a try. If you've not yet participated in some sort of group experience, I've been to meditation retreats with thousands of people, and you truly can feel a difference in what happens when everyone is doing this at once in a communal setting. And so I love the opportunity that you've just laid out right before the election. What better time to start something like this or to join in on a group meditation? Before we wrap up, I do have 3 questions that I ask everyone on the podcast. So the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health?
Number 1, transcendental meditation, morning and evening.
I was going to guess that one.
Maintain a good routine and observe a diet and exercise that are healthy. And keep in touch with knowledge and experience and, thinking of the highest values.
Mm-hmm. Learning and all of those things. Yeah. Beautiful. Do you mind if I ask how what your TM practice looks like? Is it always 20 minutes twice a day, or does it change?
I have started with 20 minutes twice a day for many years. And then with time, there are some advanced techniques that you learn. So for me, it's more like an hour or more, even morning and evening. And I start with some yoga asanas, some yoga exercises, a little bit of breathing exercises, very short, 3-4 minutes like that. And then I sit or I cross my legs, depending on the time. You can do both. I close my eyes and I dive into the ocean of being.
Beautiful, beautiful. What is one thing you think would have an impact on your health, but you have a hard time implementing it, or something you're working on?
It's I work too much.
For taking more time away from work.
I should sleep more. I should rest.
Okay.
But I'm passionate, so it balances.
Yes. Well, we're all grateful for the work you're putting out in the world. And last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you, Dr. Nader?
Healthy life is good routine, good diet, good exercise, practicing transcendental meditation morning and evening, being informed, reading, but being also master of one's own destiny, and thriving, growing more. So growing more in consciousness, and just loving the world, and knowing that life is bliss, and it's our birthright to have it if we are just going along the right path of wellness and well-being.
Well, that is beautifully said. And I can feel that always coming from you, even, today talking to you, but even watching. I've watched many videos as I was doing my TM training of you, and you just radiate that bliss and that joy. Even if you're not getting enough sleep, it seems that you're always very, very happy. So thank you again so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited to share it. For people who are listening, I know the book is one way, obviously, that they can learn more. Consciousness is all there is. Where else can they learn more about your work, about TM, about joining these meditations in September? How can they contact or follow what you're doing?
For my direct, we have a website, drtonynader.com. For transcendental meditation, just tm.org. You can find a teacher and all of that. And for all the other activities like Meditate America, check the David Lynch Foundation. They are the ones organizing. I will be there. The CEO will be there, Bob Ross, and we'll have many wonderful things happening. Hugh Jackman will be there, and some other celebrities. So you can follow it up. And Bob Ross is going to make it hopefully available for broadcast. So you don't even have necessarily to come to New York. You'll be able to follow it up. But David Lynch Foundation is doing wonderful work. We have also a university in Iowa. It's called Maharishi International University. You can check it out. That bases its teaching on transcending, but it teaches other programs, computer programs, chemistry, biology, all kinds of things.
Yes, I've had my eye on your Ayurveda courses there for a little while. So that looks very interesting to me.
Right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for your time and for your knowledge and your joy and your smile. Just thank you for all the work that you're putting into the world and sharing with all of us.
Thank you for having me with you and for sharing this with your viewers and listeners.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.